Hey, everybody, and welcome to the weekly Facebook Live for the IFPA. Today is a special day because we have a guest on, which I was trying to get on for a long time, and finally he's here, a busy, busy man. And I have to say, he's not a trainer anymore, but he was for over 20 years. And in my eyes, he is one of the best. No. Let me correct myself. He is the best personal trainer that worked in the industry. And well, here he is. Phil Learney was with me today. Welcome.
How are you doing?
Good. It could be better still.
A slightly more interesting backdrop than I have.
Yeah. Hopefully soon I'll be there live as well.
Hopefully, yeah.
I'll send some photos over. So what would be the best thing to call you today? You're not a PT anymore. So you're an educator, PT coach, business mentor?
Yeah, PT coach is kind of my social handle. It was the closest thing I could think to describing what I do now. So with the academy, obviously a large part of that is coaching PTs. A lot of my narrative on social media is about coaching PTs, albeit it's been very quiet on social of late because of various projects that I've had going on. So yeah, I guess educator, I guess in many respects, health and wellness sector in many respects. So I do a lot of stuff that's outside of the fitness industry now. With respect to direct personal trainers, I speak to a lot of businesses. I speak to a lot of people who are, physios or whatever it might be. So very much health and wellness sector. But yeah, I think you pretty much got the description down.
It's quite broad, actually. So it got. Let me ask you about your history, because it's the usual way of thinking in our industry. You see someone who's really successful, who's done it, who's made it in the world of fitness, but you don't see what's behind of it. So all the work or the struggle for many, many, many years. What was your starting point in the fitness industry as well?
If I go all the way back to school was, I was very non-academic, should I say, which is quite ironic because I spend most of my time writing now and reading studies and science and blah, blah, blah. But very much non-academic, was very into creative things, sport, and wanted to be a designer of all things. And then did a little bit of work experience, didn't like it. And then the other thing that I was decent at was sport. So the natural path at that point was get into sport and understand, try and figure out what was what. Because when I started personal training, particularly where I was in the north of England, personal training didn't really exist. It was a handful of sort of celebrity personal trainers that you'd see on morning TV, and you'd see would crop up in the press now and again who were training celebrities for movie roles or whatever it might be. So it was very much like that. And then I started as a fitness instructor, went to university, did a degree in sport and exercise science, came back, continued to be a fitness instructor for a short while, insisted on the place that I was at that didn't do personal training at the time, insisted that they did personal training and threatened that I would leave if they didn't. And they let me do it. And then from there, I helped them launch personal training across their entire group. The facility I worked for was part of a hotel chain. So it was actually a big gym in a hotel. And they had a membership base. I think, I don't know whether they have them over where you are, but a lot of the hotels over here, they have membership gyms attached to them. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those scenarios. So I helped them set it up across the group. And then from that, went various places, traveled a little bit, but continued to do personal training until I ended up back in London and had a year or so off personal training and was more on the management side of gyms. I was brought in, actually sort of headhunted to open and be part of the setting up the medical team and the personal training team of an exclusive kind of gym that was meant to open and never actually did when they ran out of money. And so I was part of that team for a while, and then I went back to personal training at the Third Space in London, which was at the time it was a single site, but it was kind of the place to work at as a personal trainer. and had kind of the most prospects, and you got paid quite a decent wage. I was in the midst of moving to America because I'd kind of topped out. The facility I was at wouldn't let me charge anymore for my services. I had a whopping great waiting list of people, and basically was just salary capped. I couldn't earn any more money doing what I was doing. So at that time, I was kind of thinking outside the box and thinking, what else could I do? And I'd started doing a few lectures and a few seminars here and there with businesses and doing some corporate stuff. But for the most part, it was about, earning more money, doing what I was doing and doing what I loved. So the US was beckoning, and I ended up being offered a job with Ultimate Performance as their kind of director of education, and was able to personal train from their new facility in Mayfair in the central London. So it was great for me. I got to charge whatever I wanted, so I could, escalate all my rates, which was always the plan. I hadn't been able to do that for about 3 or 4 years. So I made quite a dramatic jump with what I was charging. All my clients stayed with me, with the exception of one, who actually genuinely couldn't afford the new rates. And yeah, it went from there. So it was director of education at UP, then used their facility as a personal training base, and went from there. Really, I grew my educational business in and around that, and the advanced coaching academy came about, and it went from there. Really, so in amongst that time, I've owned a fitness food restaurant. I've dabbled with a few other businesses and bits and pieces, clothing range, and I've now just launched a supplement range, which is all about human performance, which again we might not get a chance to talk about today. But yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell, really.
It is. I remember the story you told me about how you left Third Space and thought about moving to America. And I believe it was a story with Nick, sitting down with Nick, who asked you to stay at UP.
Yeah, so we'd been featured in an article in Time Out magazine. So there was a feature on the best trainers in London, and me and Nick were actually the only two personal trainers. The rest were dance instructors and Pilates instructors and things like this. And they actually got us the wrong way around in many respects. They put me down as the best person for composition, and put Nick down for the best person for strength. And we actually specialized really in the other way around. But I met Nick through that inadvertently. And then he came to me and said, look, we've got this new facility opening in Mayfair. Would you like to come and be one of the coaches and be our sort of director of education? So it was a great opportunity. Got on really well with Nick, who's a fellow northerner. And yeah, it went from there, really. And Nick opened a lot of doors for me to do what I wanted to do, which was wonderful, and supported me throughout that. So it was great, yeah.
It was quite some time ago. What was it, in 2013 or something like that?
Hey, you might even know better than I did. I can't remember when it was. Basically when the facility opened at UP. So it was a long while ago, because I've been retired from personal training now a little over 5 years. So I'd have been there 5 years. So it's probably 10 years ago, pretty much, I would imagine. So yeah, it was a while ago, and I think we'd met probably similar time, a little bit before then even.
Like that. It was. I remember the first seminar that I was on. It was in Stoke-on-Trent, November 2013.
Yeah, so it would have just been shortly after that, I think. So it would have been 2000. So it might have been 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. It took me up because the way that it worked at UP is that anything inside the M25, which is kind of the outer circle of London, was my stuff. So it was my own education, which at the time was Phil Learney Performance Education. And then anything inside the M25, we used to label as UP Education, so Ultimate Performance Education. So it was, Stoke would have been probably about a year, 2 years after I'd started at UP, I think. So that would be about right timeline wise. So yeah, caveman training.
Long way back.
Yeah.
One thing that I remember, because it was about this. This was written, was it end of 2014? And I believe it was Christmas Eve when I messaged you and you told me, I'm at my family's house, so everybody's having fun, and I'm writing this book because I promised that it will be out in January
yeah, I wasn't writing it. I was actually getting it distributed. So what had happened was I'd launched it as an ebook and a hardback paperback. And what had happened was there'd just been some issues with getting it distributed on time. There was various people had kind of let me down last minute with the publishing, the editing, and various other bits and pieces. So some of that was a little bit rushed. So I apologize. There's a few errors actually in the book, spelling and grammatical, down to that last minute rush, because the goal was to have it out before Christmas. And a lot of people had actually bought it for their partners and other halves for Christmas. So I was like, look, I can't let these people down. So I was actually sat at the dinner table at my sister's up in Edinburgh, and I spent the entire day on Christmas Eve manually sending out. So obviously part of this is you meant to automate that process. And I actually manually sent out, I think it was something like 400, 500 books on that day to various people. And it was literally, you know, type in the email, write the email, attach the file, send, do the same again. And if I recall, my sister's internet wasn't the greatest. So it was it was an example of, you know, things that you have to do, you know, in the world of kind of entrepreneurship and the world of business, is that at times there's things that don't go quite right, and there's things where you have to make sacrifices, and that was one of them. And you know, and I think in a way it was nice for my family to witness that, because they were like, look, you know, it's quite a big deal writing your own book and getting it published, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was, look, I've got to do this because, you know, and obviously, you know, my dad and my sister are probably sat back doing the maths on it whilst I'm sending this 400 or 500 books out, and they go, oh, okay. Oh no, I get it. And it was, so yeah, it was nice for them to witness that. And it was, you know, it was worth it in the end. We got them all out, and the various people that were waiting for them for Christmas got them. So it was good.
Do you know how many books you sold altogether?
No, I would estimate it's about, well, I know that hardened paperbacks, I know that for a number is about 3,500, I think, hardback and paperbacks, just simply because I know what's left and how much I ordered it originally. I think ebooks have outsold that considerably. I think ebooks it's about 4,500, I think, at last count, but it could be quite a few more than that. So yeah, it was it went well. I mean, it was, you know, certainly I'd do things differently if I did it again. You know, it's probably due a rewrite to some degree, but I don't know whether my head's in doing a rewrite. I spoke to you just shortly before this call. I have a book that I'm writing right now, which is part of the new project, which again is human performance. It's all about human performance, but it's taking a slightly different take on it. It's looking at behaviors, habits. It's looking at how do you optimize, you know, a 24-hour period of the day, and how do you support that with habits, behaviors, nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a broader spectrum of information, but there's some really cool stuff in there, stuff that over the last couple of decades I've learned, but didn't really sit in my first book. They didn't, you know, they weren't the right content for that first book, because the first book was just about nutrition. It was all about nutrition. It was trying to not necessarily dumb down, but simplify a lot of complex things. Mm-hmm. You know, about metabolism, about how it all works, about how to calculate things. And again, even with that, there's things now I would change. There's different approaches. There's the evolution of the nutritional world. You know, you've got, you know, there's a higher percentage now, even in the short time between me starting writing the book and me finishing it now, there's been a big evolution in the way that people acquire food. Very few people cook. You know, that's starting to see a little bit of a comeback, particularly, you know, in the UK now, there's a lot of companies like Gusto and those kind of things where they actually send you all the ingredients and you cook it. It's almost like an empowerment thing. So there's people who've never cooked before who are looking at these instructions. So the challenge you have with something like a recipe book is that it's all well and good having all the details there, but you've then got to go out and buy all those bits and pieces, and undoubtedly there's going to be a bit of food waste and blah blah blah. So we've just, I just cooked dinner tonight for my family, and we had it was like a rice and salmon bowl, but essentially all the elements to it all come in little packages, and you don't waste anything. So everything that you put in there is there. So it's quite nice for people who don't. I mean, I'm an avid cook. My wife's an avid cook. I know that you like to cook. It's, but we're a small handful of our generation who actually have those kind of skills. So now nutrition is very different in that you have to embrace kind of the commercial side of food. You have to understand that a lot of people buy things and put them in microwaves or put them in ovens, or you also have to accept that people are eating out a lot more than ever before. So nutritional approaches have changed and evolved and need to change and evolve. And obviously from a personal training perspective, personal trainers can't prescribe diets. They're not legally able to do that. But we can assist with acquisition. We can assist with, even the skill set. I know coaches that have got, they've got chefs to come into their facilities and teach people how to do basics.
I was doing it on my own.
Yeah,
teach cooking classes.
Yeah, no, I did. A couple of when I was personal training towards the latter end of my career, there was a lot of clients that I had for a long, long time, and there was odd ones of those asked me, can I teach them to cook? And I remember one incident where I went around one of the houses with all my cooking tools and blah blah blah, and sort of went and showed them how to prep a day's worth of food, and they were like, "This is brilliant." I've never learned how to do this, and I didn't know how to do this, and didn't know how to do this. And this was somebody probably 10 years older than me, maybe even more. So that was another generation almost of somebody who hadn't learned the skills of cooking. So the nutritional climate has changed a lot. So you've got to think a lot more about how, and obviously the way that people eat has changed, not necessarily positively. You've got more food available than ever before, good stuff and bad stuff. But unfortunately, when you give people more choice, it all comes down to knowledge behind that choice. And ultimately, palatable foods are always going to win in many respects. It's I always say in the world of, you look in the world of supplements, the world of supplements are all of, people know very little about, for example, whey protein. What's the differential between whey proteins? And ultimately, people pick the one they like the most. It's got very little to do with anything else. It's, I want the one that tastes the best. And, the evolution of protein bars now, people buy the best tasting ones. There's no kind of, brand allegiance or anything like that. It's kind of, whichever one's the best, I'm going to buy. So we've got to be very considerate of that. And ultimately sending someone away to make very bland, tasteless foods because they haven't got the skills to do anything otherwise it's a recipe for disaster in many respects. And it's a recipe for giving people very weird and wonderful, well, wonderful is maybe not the word, but sort of weird relationships with food. And this stems from bodybuilders, so a lot of people, even myself, early on in my career, it was like, who's the best at dieting, who's the best at getting people into really ridiculous shape, and people would resonate towards bodybuilders. And you'd pick up bodybuilding magazines and you'd see what kind of diets they were following. You were like, oh, that must be the way to do it. So I think, extreme personalities, which a lot of us are, I would quite happily eat a bodybuilding diet back then without batting an eyelid. I'd eat plain steamed chicken and plain steamed whatever it might be. And it was a means to an end. But ultimately it was, there's a lot of people that won't do that. And certainly nowadays, people certainly won't do it.
We all did this, I believe, thinking that you have to earn your food or something. It
has to be painful.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if something tastes good, it can't be good for you, which is nonsense, which was really one of the biggest lies I think everybody got fed.
This brings me back to March 2015. I remember there's a story behind it. It was 5 a.m. in the morning, so here in Slovenia, and I was training a client because my former partner couldn't get her to fill the muscles right and everything. So I did that session with her 5 a.m. It was 4 a.m. for you, and I was messaging you right after this. It was 5 a.m. your time, 6 a.m. here. And I told you, I just did the best personal training session in my life. And I just used all the principles, everything. that I got from you. And here's the message that you've sent to me back. It was your time 505. So
you got the message in front of you?
Yeah.
Really?
It is. It says,
do I want to hear this?
What we do is not about getting someone ripped, but changing people's lives. It's all about getting better in what we do, which is about learning and a willingness to learn. And this is in every presentation since March 2015 that I'm using for personal trainers, because I think it's so profound. It really is. We were all in this kind of thinking or a thought process that we have to get everybody super lean, super ripped, shredded, bikini-like, shape, and so on and so on. But it's not about that, actually. Being a personal trainer, it's way more, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's, and again, this is something that I've, I think from, my own experience and probably from your own experience as well, right? Is that, but I think it's like anything in life. You have to sit back and you have to kind of look at it on a granular level, and you have to accept certain things that you did in, you do it throughout life, right? You think back to things you did when you were a kid, and then you figure out why you did them, and this was training for me. It was, back then I just trained. I trained because I wanted to look better. And ultimately, me looking better made me feel better, made me perform better, made me function better, made me get more respect from my peers, made me more confident. And all of a sudden, it became this whole, it became a psychological thing.
Yeah.
So it was this, I could go somewhere and I'm in complete control of my outcome because I'm the one in control of the input. I could put the effort in or I couldn't. Nobody else was dictating that. Nobody was saying, look, you can't. There wasn't a matter of, and funnily enough, it's a bit like, school, right? So you go into school and there's certain things you're good at, certain things you're not. If you don't understand it and you don't know how to do it, so algebra, you go in and you start doing algebra, you don't understand how to do it, you don't enjoy it. And you will just sit there frustrated as hell because you can't do it. Now, the funny thing about weight training was relatively simple, or I thought it was back then, because you'd go into a gym, you'd look how people picked weights up and moved them around, and you'd copy them. And you get into these machines and you get into a chest press, and the chest press, basically, you could push it in whatever direction you wanted, but it was only going in one direction. And you'd push it however you could. I remember, my shoulders all rounded, and it was literally, get as much weight on there and move it as many times as you can. And it was just this real, and I made some horrendous mistakes, but I also, I got in control of my nutrition and my diet and my weight, because when I trained, I was better with my diet. When I was better with my diet, I trained better. So there was that concurrent thing. And it carries over into life, is that all of those things that I applied to weight training, the mentality of it, the discipline, the commitment to it, all of these things, it then transgressed into all these other elements of life, right? So business was the same. It was like, look, all I have to do is just work hard, and I have to keep doing it. And that was the gym, right? It was this whole thing. And I remember somebody saying to me early on, or I read it perhaps in one of the bodybuilding magazines, and it was always this thing of, you go in the gym, and then as you're in the gym, you kind of glance and you look at the mirror, and you go in the change room, you take your top off, and you see how you look after your training session. And I always remember someone saying, look, the way you look straight after your training session is going to be the way you look in a few months. So it was always you're almost chasing this dangling carrot all the time. And I always remembered that. And I always remembered that with business. It was always, look, you just keep working. You just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until you get better at it. And as you get better at it, you normally get the rewards from it to some degree. They might not be as fast as you want them to be, but that's the reality of it, right? And I think weight training is this humbling experience, and this humbling experience you've then got to relay onto your clients, in that, we're forever talking about this thing, but it's weird because as an industry, all we want to do is shorten those timelines. We keep going, we almost, I say a lot of the industry lies about those timelines. They go, right, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, you do this. Whereas I used to sit down with my clients and I'd look at them and I'd ascertain what they did in a day and their behaviors and their habits and blah, blah, blah. And I was like this blunt northerner where I'd go, you're not going to be able to do that in 12 weeks. And I'd be like, look, that's going to take us. And I'd ballpark it. And then in my head, I'd probably add another quarter of that time on. So it was the same when I prepped people for bodybuilding shows. The bodybuilding shows was always this weird thing. People would start dieting 12 weeks out or 16 weeks out. But like, well, surely it should be based on your start point. So I'd often get somebody who'd come in and go, look, I want to do this bodybuilding show. It's in 13 weeks. I'd look at this person and physically assess them and see what they're doing now and what, where we could go. And I'd turn around to them and say, you're not doing that competition. You're going to do the next one because you're not going to be ready in time. And they'd be like, oh, I don't understand that. 12 weeks, I've got 12 weeks. I said, yeah, but your start point isn't one that we can get you to where you need to be in 12 weeks. So it was always, you push it. So I always used to say, look, whatever you think it is, add another 2 or 3 weeks and you're probably not far off. And going back to when I trained bodybuilders, the amount of people that would turn up at shows and they'd be like, oh, I was robbed and I didn't do this and I didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And really the vast majority of the time, they just didn't diet long enough. That was the problem. It wasn't anything else. It was just, look, they turned up on stage 2 to 3 weeks out. And I'm like, look, you're trying to peak a body that can't be peaked. You're trying to get a body into this ridiculous shape that can't be got into this ridiculous shape because you're not ready. So it was always this, and nobody would want to hear it. But then because of that, I think that was a large part of why I was successful in what I did, is that I was always realistic with timelines. I was always realistic with my clients, and I would tell them honestly what they could achieve. And I had clients that, and going back on the quote that you mentioned before, is that, you'd realize very quickly that if somebody wasn't willing to do all the components of what needed to be done to get ripped or get shredded or whatever they wanted to do, and everybody had this aspiration of being super lean, right? So most people come to you with this aspiration of being super lean, but in reality, they want to be super lean, but then you've got to ascertain what the other things they are that they want. So you're like, you want to be super lean, and I want to go out on a Friday night. Okay. And I want to eat out with my friends. Okay. And then I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And then in amongst that, you start to create this picture of what they can achieve physically. And occasionally you get someone who is just a genetic freak where you'd be like, right, you can do all that and you'll be fine. But the vast majority of people, you'd sort of go, right, in reality, for us to be able to achieve this, there's certain things in there that aren't going to be able to coexist. You can't do one with the other. It's like people who want to earn they want to earn £1 million, but they don't want to do overtime. Like, unfortunately, that doesn't fit. It's not a cultural fit with the outcome, the business outcome that you want. It doesn't work. So unfortunately, there'd be times where you'd be like, look, I can get you so far. And what you'd get is you get people who then, it would be coming up to summer. So they were then prepared to give up a couple of these other things on this list where they'd be like, look, I can give that up for the next 5 or 6 weeks. You'd be like, okay, cool. So we can get you a little bit leaner for your holidays or whatever it might be. But then in reality, you're going to come back to where you were because those behaviors and those habits and those things that you want to do and want to have as part of your life, so it all comes down to sacrifices, right? Is that what are you prepared to give to get what you want? And honing people's physiques is all about that. And being a good coach is about that, is that you've got to, work with people's weaknesses, work with people's strengths. And I always say, going back to working with professional athletes, first thing you do with a professional athlete is you find the weaknesses, and the vast majority of athletes have just had somebody patting them on the back their entire career going, oh, you're really good at that. You're really good at this. I'm going to let you continue to do it. And I'd be like, you're really bad at that. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do the thing you're really bad at, which would be the hole that you've got in your performance, whatever it might be. So you find the weak point and you work on the weak point, right?
And the truth is, with professional athletes, unless you're working in a club environment, you don't see them whole year round. I mean, I got the athletes that are playing in the US and I coach them over here. So I got to coach them, let's say, 6-8 weeks a year?
Yeah.
So what can you do in 8 weeks? It's the weak spots and better them. And that's it.
And you'd be amazed. And some cases you'd be, I'd find things, I worked with a guy who played in the NFL for many years and was very, very renowned in the NFL. And I pulled him up straight away and said, oh my God, I said, you're so weak in that particular plane of movement. He goes, nobody's ever told me that. And I was astounded. I was like, wow, really? I said, and I said, I'm surprised that this hasn't occurred, i.e. an injury that would be related to that kind of thing. I said, I'm surprised that something like that hasn't occurred. And maybe that was the kiss of death, but 6 months later, he got the exact injury I said that, would transpire from having a weakness in that particular point. And he messaged me and he said, you were right. He goes, and I worked with you for the short time I was with you, but then I went away and I didn't, because everybody was telling me to do all this other stuff that I was great at. So I continued to do it, and I was continued to be skillful and fast and all these different things, but I never worked on that weak point, which ultimately resulted in this injury. So it was, it's the same thing whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about, so the idea in a business is I'm going into a fitness business and I'm trying to look at the weak points, trying to find that. So a lot of those things that you learn as a coach, and you learn as a coach, and I learned as a coach, they work in so many different capacities. They work in business, they work in family life, they work in all those different things, and I think that's a big thing. Sorry, I keep itching my nose, but I've got horrendous hay fever, and my nose feels like I've got ants crawling around inside of it, if I'm to be completely descriptive about that. So I keep itching my nose. Hay fever is terrible here at the moment.
Let me ask you a question. So in the past, let's say 10 years, we've seen, social media uprising immensely.
Yep.
Did it change the industry?
Yep.
What perspective? The way I see it, people tend to get, instant success way more than they used to, or they think that they can get it if they just, be the next good thing on Instagram, YouTube, or whatever. But what I think they're missing is work ethics. Something that I've seen with you for many years now is you were always prepared to work your ass off in order to get where you wanted.
Yeah.
But did social media change this in people?
No, because I don't think that work ethic existed in the first place. I think what it's done, it's given people a ticket to, it's the same as, hell, go back years, right? Fat burners, right? Fat burners are always going to be popular because people want to do something with minimal effort. Not to say that, something with a bit of caffeine in isn't going to help, but what ultimately happens, somebody buys a fat burner for 50 or 60 pound. I've used this analogy before, is that they buy a fat burner for 50 or 60 pound. They improve their diet because they've just invested 50 or 60 pound. They improve their diet and they improve their training and they lose fat. So they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. No. You improved your training and diet because you just spent 50 pound on something. So it gives this kind of false sense of what achieved that for me. And social media is just very, it's edited, it's very fake, it's very, and I don't think we'll ever get around that. But it's this whole, what's success and what are success metrics? What are they? And a metric for me as I got old, and a metric for you, and I know that you struggle with it, I struggle with it, is management of time, right? Having a young family and being able to manage that time effectively and efficiently so that you can actually do the things that I think so many people who are successful in business miss out on. And people talk about this work-life balance and it's almost like this mythological thing, and people accept that it's never going to happen. And, it's a bit like fitness, right? A lot of people accept that they're never going to get in the shape they want to get into, but that's just a list of priorities that they're not prepared to tweak or change or whatever it might be. And I see the same with business, is that there's a lot of things in there that you've got to compromise and you've got to figure ways around and you've got to become more efficient at. And sometimes you have got to turn your phone off, and sometimes you've got to turn your laptop off. And my family fully understand that I run my own business, which means that ultimately me doing my own business is the thing that ultimately changes their quality of life, because I'm kind of at the head of that. And then, my wife does her bit and but financially that's largely my contribution. So they understand that if I don't get the hours in and I don't get to do these things, and I can't just disappear for a week and never pick my laptop up and never pick my phone up, and it's better than it was before because I've got a great team of people around me who can pick up those things. But that's taken a lot of years to do that. And that management aspect. So with respect to the question about social media, I think social media has almost created this thing where success is a metric based around how many people you've got following you and how many people like your posts. But ultimately, it's not gonna put food on the table, and you've got to really go back to what's going to put food on the table. And if having a huge following on social media puts food on the table, cool, carry on. You know, but for a lot of people, they're chasing a metric that doesn't change their world. You know, you've got personal trainers who work in gyms who are spending more time trying to pick up a social media following than pick up a full diary. You know, they're spending more time on social media worried about this metric that doesn't change anything. You know, so they've got, you know, we've got 50,000 people follow me on social media, but I work from a gym that has a catchment area of about 5 miles in any direction. And I'm doing nothing to fill my diary in that space. What I'm doing is I'm trying to look popular and be popular and blah, blah, blah. And I think this, you know, this goes back to back when, you know, when we were younger, where everybody wanted a sponsorship deal from a supplement company. And what would happen is in the, not in the early stages of social media, but as social media got gathered a bit of momentum, it was quite funny, really, because you get these people who would develop these audiences, these huge audiences, you know, 100,000 plus people. And they'd get a deal with the supplement company where a supplement company would give them 30 or 40 pounds, you know, net cost of goods per month to use their entire audience, you know. And in the world of marketing, in the world of audiences and what people will pay for, you know, it was like almost, you're a bit of a mug, you're a bit of an idiot, because, you know, what you're doing is you're getting a couple of tubs of protein every month to let another business tap into your audience that you've cultivated for probably 5 years and nurtured and talked to and discussed and got on a similar wavelength and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you're like, you know, and it's just quite funny to see it sometimes where you're like, look, and then you've got other people who are really taking advantage of that. I've got friends who've got 250,000 people who follow them on social media, but they've almost monetized that. And they know what they're talking about, and they've had a product or a service or whatever it might be that revolved around that network, which is fantastic. You know, if you're an online coach and you've got this massive network, hey, brilliant, great work. As long as you're producing something, and to me, it's a service that's high quality. But unfortunately, the industry is always going to be riddled with people that are giving out bad service, providing a bad service, cookie cutter stuff that they're capitalizing on. You know, I know a lot of celebrities on social media who were in the fitness world or have fell into the fitness world somehow, who, you know, they leverage all the wrong stuff. And there's an ethical and a moral standpoint there that's wrong, but ultimately people are monetizing it and people are stupid enough to buy it. So I don't think you're ever going to get around that.
You know, there was something that we've talked about years ago where you said, what I'm trying to teach is not a cookie cutter, but the real thing about business. And this is something that I got a feeling when I was in your seminars back in the years. And this is something that what made me choose the IFPA and work with the IFPA to get this done as well, because what we noticed in the past years is there's a lot of bad coaches with good marketing skills.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do ultimately is to get good coaches, good marketing skills so that they can compete on the market.
Yeah, but it's, you know, I could help anybody sell anything if there is no moral and no ethical compass. You know, because it's not rocket science. It's, you know, I can get you a bunch of clients that you're not going to service very well, that will, when they've decided that you're not very good at what you do, they'll move on, and then you'll tap into another bunch, and then tap into another bunch, and there's so many programs that will do that. And hey, you know, people are making money out of it. People are making good money out of it. But to me, that's the sort of thing that I don't think I could ever do. I don't think I would ever feel comfortable doing. I don't think I'd ever want to know that ultimately I'm getting a load of really bad coaches to sell something a repeated number of times. You know, and this is the thing with online coaching, right? Because online coaching, there is no echo chamber like there is in personal training. So personal training, if I was a bad coach, people would know. You know, it's like presenting in a seminar, right? So it's presenting in a seminar is very different to somebody commenting on social media and making out they're very intelligent about whatever it might be on social media. Being able to go to a room of hundreds of people, answer questions, you know, relay information, take anything that comes your way and be able to, you know, answer it in some respects or admit that you can't answer it. And that's a true marker of somebody who knows their craft, knows their trade, has the education that surrounds all that. Whereas somebody on social media who will never, and again, I'm not saying, you should pick fights with people, but ultimately a lot of these people that are very vocal on social media, if you got into a discussion face to face with them, all of a sudden, all these words and these complex, whatever it might be, that came from them on a keyboard just disappear. And they actually don't understand the craft. What they understand is how to Google things very quickly and how to, type a retort based around something they found online. And it's a very similar thing to this, is that, I could write a program tomorrow that I could distribute on social media and say it's the ultimate fat loss program, and it would be a cookie cutter, but I'd probably make 20 or 30 grand out of it very comfortably. And that's what a lot of these kind of fitness celebrities have done, is that they've created a program, giving it some fancy name, the whatever it might be program, and just they sell it to millions of people, because there's millions of people who are desperate to get in shape, and if you target at the right people, you will sell millions of them, and so be it. I guess in some respects it's, you're putting food on the table, you've got a family to feed, and blah blah blah, do what you need to do. But again, there's an ethical and moral standpoint behind that I'm not comfortable distributing and comfortable. At the end of the day, there's a million ways to make money, but there's a lot less ways to make money in an ethical fashion. So it's where do you stand? And again, I get people that don't. I know people who are up to no good with respect to how they make money and blah blah blah. And hey, up to them, their call.
When you get more known in the industry, you get a lot of mocking around as well on social media. How do you deal with this?
In the early days, probably a thick skin. Later on, have less. The problem is, I think when you've got someone who's got a decent, sort of moral compass, I think the problem is they do take things to heart. Is that the problem is you've almost created this beast that doesn't, so I would care what people thought, and I still do. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I care what people thought. But then as I got older and I got more understanding of it, I'd also understand that a lot of people are just out there trying to pick fights. They want to pick a fight, or they want to, but also then as you get older as well, you start to become more precious of time. And I'm like, look, if somebody's got that strong an opinion on something, and I get people who message me through different platforms. So they'd message me through Instagram, I block them, and then they message me through Facebook saying, oh, you blocked me because you didn't want to talk about it. I said, no, I blocked because I didn't want to get into a 5-day discussion with you when you're clearly not going to change your standpoint, and I'm clearly not going to change mine for whatever reason that might be. And I said, so there is no discussion, is there? There's an argument that you want to, and you get people who would try to leverage almost your audience by proving you wrong. It's a bit like you want to beat the best player in the game because it proves a point. And it was always this thing where I used to, when we used to go out, in town, you'd always be wary about the big guy that was with you, and whether the big guy could handle himself or whether he couldn't. But people would pick fights with the big guy because it would be to prove a point. Because somebody wanted to pick a fight with the big guy. And typically the person picking the fight with the big guy would be the small guy. So the small guy want to beat the big guy up because it's proving a point. It's, and that's how social media is sometimes. And I think you've got to sometimes ride it out. Sometimes you've got to be a bit ruthless and go, look, I'm just going to block you. I've got a blocked list a mile long on social media because I'm like, look, I'm not interested in a discussion about this. And this isn't because I feel that I'm right and they're wrong. There's just various things that are worth discussing and various things that aren't. And I try not to put too much on social that's hugely controversial. I try to put things that are just helpful, useful. Sometimes I try and crack a joke that goes a bit wrong. Sometimes I try and, create some kind of witty. And to be fair, there's been odd times where I've picked on the industry and I think when I do that, I'm not bored of writing bigger content because you almost get drawn into this field of social media where you're like, look, if I put something funny up, people love it. If I put something serious up that's helpful, people don't love it as much. And it's this, and I get why people get drawn into it, and I get why, people who were like, look, if I, and I remember one of my colleagues made a joke about it the other day, and they said, look, if I put something serious on social media, it gets X amount of likes, it gets X amount of shares, X amount of saves, X amount of, whatever it might be. But then if I put a picture of my ass up, all of a sudden I've got this massive traction. And it's this sort of fine line between it that I think you've got to, at the end of the day, it's, not flaunt what you've got, but leverage it. I always say leverage what you've got. And for some people, some people leverage things, people leverage disabilities. They use it as a tool to differentiate themselves from other people, which is fantastic. People leverage hairstyles. They have hair that's a different color or a different style or whatever it might be. And this is society, right? Is that you've got to learn to leverage what you have and utilize what you have or what's been taken from you or whatever's been done. And, and there's all these different ways of going about it. And I always said, the chap I remember I did a consult with, I said, was the hair a strategic move? I said to him, he had this big long hair, like exquisite long hair. And I said, was it a strategic move? He goes, what do you mean strategic move? I goes, did you grow your hair because of the industry, or was your hair already like that? And he goes, I've never thought of it like that. I said, yeah, but ultimately when you walk into a room, you want people to recognize you. People remember you straight away. I have a good friend of mine who's got a scar across his face, from, something happened when he was a kid and he's got the scar right across his face. And he says he leverages the hell out of it because he goes to an event, people remember him. In this this mix of everybody. And remember, people at school do it. You used to get the kids at school who color the hair. People color the hair because they want to stand out. People, tattoos. People used to get tattoos to stand out. I think people get tattoos for very different reasons now. But back when I was a kid, it was like, in a small town, people used to get these tribal tattoos because they wanted to stand out. And whereas now there's so many people I think have tattoos, is that you have tattoos to tell a story, you have tattoos to signify something or whatever it might be. But I still think there are subcultures where people just have them because they want to stand out, and people have now started tattooing their faces and things like this, and because again they want to stand out, and there's nothing wrong with that, but stand out and leverage it, make use of it, because it does make you stand out, it does make you different, it does make those things. And it's things like your stories. I had a chat with a friend of mine the other day he's ex-military, and he doesn't like telling the story of him being ex-military. He's like, because everybody's done that. He said, everybody's done it. Everybody tells everybody they're in the forces and they're in the special forces and blah, blah, blah. He goes, I don't like to do that because everybody's done it. I said, everybody's done it. I said, no. I said, just in your world, it seems like everybody does it because you follow everybody in the special forces. Whereas the rest of the world, straight away, you tick this box of, respect. So straight away, you've got respect. It's like people who do martial arts, right? You've got a martial arts background. Tell people about it. Tell people about your upbringing. Tell people about your background. Tell people about that, the shortfalls and the hardness and the hardship you've gone through in your life, because that's part of the story. And I think it means you've got this genuine story that backs this new narrative up. I was massively overweight as a child, and I'll tell people about that. I'll tell people about that journey that I went on from being as I was, this insecure, self-conscious, probably quite disturbed child who, spent a lot of their childhood crying, spent a lot of their childhood, unsure of who they were and how they identify, and trying to be different. Trying to be different wasn't a goal for me because I was different, and I got picked on like shit because I was different. So there was never this point where I'm like, look, I want to draw attention to myself. Whereas other people blend in, so they do things to try and make themselves stand out. And social media is very much like that. It's, you've got to kind of find, and people talk about it in businesses, you've got to find a niche. Like, you don't have to find the niche. You just have to find a way of standing out. And largely in our industry, and again, for the people that are listening, in our industry, providing an incredible personal training service makes you stand out, because there's not that many people doing it, you know. And this is the way I see it. I see it as, look, if I can nurture people and coach people and train people and let facilitate people, providing an excellent personal training service, they stand out. Then there's the other elements of business, you know. So we do, you know, we do a lot of branding stuff within the academy now, and part of that is to help businesses stand out. Is that because I know notoriously in the world of fitness, the branding of fitness industries and businesses is terrible. It's like clip art mania. It's like everybody's got a picture of somebody, you know, a silhouette of somebody holding a dumbbell. And I might, you know, and you know, we deal with, you know, because of the other side of the business, we deal with, hell, what are we up to now? I think we're close to about 12,000 businesses. So 12,000, I've seen inadvertently 12,000 fitness logos, and there's probably about 3,000 of them look pretty much the same. You know, and that's not going to make your business stand out. And the quality of what you deliver isn't going to make your business stand out. And I think my background with sort of design, and I wanted to be a graphic designer, I look at stuff like that and I go, wow, that doesn't look very impressive. So for me, you know, getting on a video, it's important for me that the video's, you know, the same with you, right? The setup looks professional. You know, if this was me on my phone, you know, and you could barely hear me, and there wasn't a, you know, and there was nothing about it, you know, and I always say to coaches, look, when you work in that commercial facility and people say, wear your uniform, because people then can identify your name badges. You probably heard me talk about this before. Name badges. Name badges are a way for somebody to be able to address you by first name. That's a very personal thing. And that, you know, if I'm in a restaurant and somebody's got a name badge on, I will address them by their first name. And you'd be amazed how that changes the level of service they give you and deliver you. It's like leaving a tip. If you intend going back to a place, leave a tip. If you had good service, leave a tip. If you know, and even in a non-tipping culture, which the UK is very much a non-tipping culture, because you then stand out and people would remember you. And this was taught to me by a good friend of mine. We went to this bar and he gave the barman this insane tip. And I was like, I don't get why you did that. He goes, yeah, because that's the first drink we've had tonight. I said, and he said, it's really busy in the bar. And I'll tell you what, every time we go to the bar now, he's going to serve us first. And that's exactly what happened. And I'll tell you what, what that did, it changed our experience. So what turned into a night where we could have spent a large proportion of our night stood at a bar waiting to be served, we didn't have that negative side of that experience. And what he tipped him in the onset, I'd have paid him 10 times over to get that same experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So straight away, he changed the whole dynamic of that experience by, you know, the first drink we ordered, he was like, you keep the change. And it was a good amount. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, and we'll do the same next time and the same next time. And it just added a little bit to your bill at the end of the night. But ultimately that accumulated in he had a great night. We had a great night. We didn't queue once. And to be fair, when it got to the end of the night, he started giving us loads of free drinks. so there was
payback.
You know, because and there was this whole lesson that I learned from that. And it was just weird. It was sort of, I was like, really? Wow. I said, I've been going out for years. I've never thought about that. And it was, and you know, and that's this thing about like coaching, is that give people an experience they want to talk about and they remember, you know, and that was always my thing. Give people a memorable experience and give them information that they go away and go, wow, I never knew that. You know, I'm giving an educational seminar on Friday. And this is to, you know, around the human performance brand that we've just launched. And there's information in there that people are going to be like, oh my God, all these years, nobody's ever told me that. And I know that. And I know there's about 8 or 9 pieces of information I'm excited to give people, where I'm reinforcing, I'm telling people about various things that they just didn't know before, about stuff like caffeine, right? People get caffeine, but they don't understand it. They don't understand its impact on receptors. They don't understand its half-life. They don't understand how it would impact someone's sleep, how it would impact someone's day, and why it does that. So then, you know, I'm going to go through all that and explain to them, this is how it works. So therefore, when you're advising your clients about when they should consume caffeine, you're more educated. you're more notified about it and you understand more about it. So therefore, you can give them good suggestions, which might then in turn improve their sleep. You improve their sleep, it improves their training, improves their output. All of a sudden, you become a really valuable asset to them. And you know, I used to manage, and I talked about this with the nutritional environment. Manage your clients' nutritional environment. I had clients I hired chefs for. I had clients I used to phone the hotels and get them to make the food that they needed. I used to organize meal prep when meal prep wasn't a thing. I used to speak to one of my clients had a driver, and I used to tell the driver where to go. So he would give me his route, and I'd tell him where to go to pick up their food for the day. And he used to go and pick it up. And you know, and I managed their environment. And because of it, I didn't charge extra for it. It was just integrated into a very, very expensive personal training price, you know? So my hourly rate wasn't a reflection of my hourly rate. And my personal training rate was a reflection of the level of service that you would get. And this is what coaches forget. You're not getting paid for your time. You're getting paid for your expertise and the service you deliver outside of that.
True. Which brings me back. Can you remember how long did I ask you to be your client?
I can't remember. It was a while.
It was a year. It was a year.
Was it a year? Yeah.
When we're talking about level of service, this is from my experience. I used to work with 2 other online coaches back then, both from the bodybuilding world, which couldn't understand that I run a business, that I have a family, that I'm still a part of. So it was an awful experience. What we've changed, and it was, I can tell you still, I have a very good memory. Yasmina doesn't like it necessarily, but still, I can tell you exactly where we were sitting when you agreed for me to become your client. It was Byron in Covent Garden. It was October 2014, and it was right after a seminar, a business seminar that you gave in London, and you asked us to join you, at dinner. So,
right. Well, before we carry on here, I just want to state the reason I didn't take you on as a client is because it was all to do with bandwidth, and it was always all to do with the fact that I didn't think, and to be fair, I still don't think I delivered the best service I could have delivered.
Well, it was the best service for me.
But I still don't think it was the best service I could have delivered, because ultimately you coerced me into taking you on when really I shouldn't. So this happened a lot throughout my career, where I'd turn a lot of people down because I just didn't have the scope to look after them in the way. And this is why later on in my career, later on in my career, is that I wouldn't take on physique competitors, because it was hugely time. It was a time draining exercise, right? So you know, I didn't not take you on because I didn't want to. It was just so the listeners know. I didn't take you on because I didn't have the bandwidth.
You told me, look, I'm not doing this because I know I cannot deliver quality service.
Yeah,
I understood it. It was completely clear, but still, I was persistent. So I asked you, if you take me on, I'll be traveling 1 time a month, so 1 day a month to London to train with you.
Yeah.
And you said yes. And I was. I don't know if I told you how much I spent to be there on this specific day.
Hey, look, I'm not stupid. I can calculate it. Yeah.
It was, but you know what? It was all worth it. I would do it again.
Good.
I would still do it again. And this is the reason why I wanted to talk about it, is people don't actually know how much our clients are prepared to spend on us.
Oh, massively. I mean, I used to have, Adam used to travel down from Stoke. You know, and Stoke's like a 2.5 hour train ride, I think.
Yes.
He used to do 2.5 hours here, 2.5 hours back. And he literally used to get off the train, come train, get back on the train and go back.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I actually, there was often I would say to him, I'd say, do you really want to carry on doing this? I said, I'm sure I can sort something where you know I can train you remotely or whatever. And it got to a point where I actually felt quite sorry for him. But I felt sorry for him when he didn't want to feel sorry for you. He quite enjoyed it. He loved the fact that he got on the train, he came and traveled and blah blah blah. And you know, and yeah, and it was. I always remember there was a physio I used to work with quite closely, and he used to, no word of a lie. So this is central London, right? So he had the most ridiculous work ethic, right? Most ridiculous. I've told you about him before. I've told you about Kevin before. And I would get an appointment with him, an appointment that didn't exist. So he would look after me. So he'd see me when he didn't have appointments. He'd fit me in somewhere. And, and I had various injuries through powerlifting and what have you, but he was the best physio undoubtedly in the country and still is. And I'd go and sit in the waiting room of his clinic at about 1 o'clock in the morning and wait for an appointment. And it would literally be open-ended. I could be sat there for an hour and a half and things like this. And sat next to me would be a Man United player who'd got in their car at the end of training on a Thursday night or a Wednesday, Tuesday night and driven all the way from Manchester, all the way to London for an appointment that would probably take about 20 minutes with this physio. Then we'd get back in the car, drive all the way back to Manchester and do that again and again and again repeatedly in the week.
Insane.
And they couldn't go on trains. They were Premier League footballers. They had to go in cars and they wouldn't have a driver. So they get in cars, but then it would be literally, there'd be like a Man United player here. There'd be a celebrity actor or actress here. And and it would literally just be littered with this who's of one night I was sat there, GSP sat there, George St. Pierre sat there, waiting. And he's actually came off a flight from Dubai and they've stopped off in London and they've got the train or the car or whatever it was to London to go and see the physio. And he was in between a UFC fight and he was on, he was en route. And it was just bizarre. But I always remember that there was all these people that were hugely willing to go all that way to get this service. And it wasn't and obviously physio, it's not, you're going in there and he's inflicting pain on you for 20 or 30 minutes. And it wasn't this, and it was bizarre because it wasn't this bells and whistles kind of service that I was trying to offer as a personal trainer. It was literally, he was so good at his job is that people would travel that far to do it. And it was nuts. Yeah. Anyways, tangent.
1 a.m. in the morning.
Oh yeah. The amount of times that I'd be there, and the security guard, this was the gym I used to work at. And the security guard used to let people in through there was like a private door up the back and they actually had just the way it worked out, but they could cordon off the whole rest of the gym. And there was just literally a staircase that would come up to where they were. And they used to use one of the exits and it was all legitimate. He was allowed to be doing it. It wasn't like, a backhander here and there, but they had 24-hour security. So the security guard would welcome these people and let them in. And it was all I think it all worked out quite well because obviously at that time in the morning, they could sort of sneak in with nobody seeing them. And I mean, we were talking like world-class footballers, athletes, celebrities, and they'd just be sat there in this waiting room waiting. And their appointment would be at midnight, but they wouldn't see him until 1:15. And they'd just happily sit there, quite content, on their phones or whatever they were doing, reading a book. And, it was bizarre to see. But that's that's talking about somebody who knew their craft and had an incredible level of service.
I know that we could go on like this forever. It's over an hour, and I promised you to be 30 minutes. So and I just get carried away with you.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again sometime, as long as you want to take value from it.
Our season ends next week Tuesday, so we'll be having a break during the summer. So we'll be back in September, and I'll be happy to host you again here.
Sure.
Thank you so much. The last thing, what would be one thing that you would say to future personal trainers what to look out for?
To look out for? Be very wary who your clients are. Be very wary who your clients are, where they reside, how you're going to service them. And obviously, as your career progresses, that's going to change. So if you're going face-to-face, your audience is in that catchment area. Remember that. If you're going online, your audience is a bigger catchment area, but you still need to almost refine it in a little way. Be very clear who you are and what you deliver, but get good at your craft. Practice it and get great at being a coach. And again, going back to, there was the big NSCA conference. So it's over in the US. They spoke to all the top level coaches. And they said, look, what's the one skill that you'd like to learn to make you a better coach? And it always came back to communication. So get good at communicating. You learn how to communicate with your clients. I always remember early on in my career, I did a course where the guy made us. It was actually my fitness instructor course, and the guy made us coach a bench press without speaking and also bench press without doing anything. And I always remember that, I took quite a lot away from that. It was like, look, be able to do it without a line of communication. So if you can coach it just by showing people, and also coach it just verbalizing it without showing people, you can almost ultimately become an online coach, right?
True.
So yeah, but learn that skill on the gym floor.
Thank you for that. Nice one. Phil Learney, ladies and gentlemen. So be sure you follow him on Instagram, Facebook, and all the other stuff that you get on. And he'll be back for sure. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for having me. See
you soon, guys. Next week, do not forget, it's the last time. So we'll see you Tuesday at 2 p.m. Tampa time. See you there. Bye-bye.